Hello, in this tutorial I'll teach you how to create object types. So what are object types? You have all of this explanation in our documentation, but basically you can use object types in parameter classes or result classes or in types of attributes in our parameter maps or result maps in the data access layers, or you can use them in annotations in the business logic layers. So basically everything is explained in our documentation. So let's just log in our framework so I can teach you how to create object types. So we choose the advanced workspace and let's show the advanced items, so we can go to our library tab and open the external library and the DAO folder. So all the object types should be inside of this folder here called DAO, D-A-O. So we have in this demo version we have some dummy object types that the framework comes by default, so you can see some examples, and all the corresponding file starts with this T icon. So all of these three are object types, but for the sake of this tutorial let's just create a new one, and let's click here in this menu, add object type DAO object, or if we want to do it in the root folder of the DAO, we just do by clicking in this menu here to add object type DAO object. We write the name of the corresponding class of the object type, we click OK, and automatically it add already here the type that we created, and in the center it shows the corresponding code of that file. So by default it sets this code here, where we can see that we have three methods: the constructor, the set data, and the get data, that we can change. So according with the use of this object type, you need to change or not some specific methods. All of this is explained again in our documentation. So if you want to use this for a parameter class in some data access rule, that means that the system will use the get data methods, which means that this method here you need to return the corresponding data that you already have inside of this class. So this means that in some parts of your code, your logic code, you initialize your data variable with some attributes and some data. Basically this data variable, it's an associative array with a bunch of data, and so in here you need to return the data specifically so the system can insert that data into the database. So let's say that you have, in this case, so I can just show you an example here. Let's say that the status that it was set by some previous code, by our logic, it is a boolean, it is true or false. And what you want to do in the database, you want not to set true or false, because the status, let's say there is a int from the type int, and you want to return 1 or 0. So what you can do is that if the status is true, just set the value 1. If the status is false, let's just set the value 0. This is just an example. Like I'm in this case, like I'm putting here the status as a private variable, because let's say that in some case in here, when I set the data in my logic, I set the status variable with the correspondent data status, so with the boolean or false. This is just an example. Or through here, basically maybe in my logic I just call one of these setters and I pass it here a boolean, and automatically this status now has a boolean value. So this is just an example. That is for a parameter class. For a result class, it means that the system will use the set data. Basically we'll use the set data with the corresponding data that comes from the database, from a rule that was executed in the database, and the database returned that corresponding result. So let's say that it returns a record of some object which has a bunch of properties, and one of that properties is the status, which is 1 or 0. So in this case you needed to put the 0 or 1 into a boolean, because now you wanted to use this in PHP. So this is just an example how can you play with both methods according with the use that you want to give it. Everything is explained in our documentation in a more simple way, but basically in here it explains what you can do, and you have some sample codes that show you some examples. Additionally, the object types, besides being using for the classes, result classes or parameter classes, it can be used for types. It can be used when you are creating a parameter map or a result map inside of a data access rule. You can set the attributes, and that attributes will have a type. So you can't create a new type. You can say that I want to have an integer, but an integer bigger than 10, something like that. I don't know. So you can then set a type, and can then make sure that the system validates all the inputs for that specific attribute, that that value is always bigger than 10 and it is an integer. So basically this is just an example. So in this case, the data, it is the value, it will become the value, so it's not an associative array as it is in the parameter class or result class. It is simply a value, which can be, in this case, in your case, you want it to be a numeric field. So what you needed to do here in the set data, you needed to validate that this argument, you wanted to check if this will be a numeric field, like something like that. So the parent set data, in this case, it will return a status, it will return true or false, and what you could do is that if the parent returns true, then I'll check if it is a numeric field and if it is bigger than 10. If it is, returns true. Otherwise, I could launch an exception and then returns false. Something like that. This is just an example. So what I'm saying is that when you're creating an object type to be used as a type inside of a map, or as an annotation, as a type of annotation inside of a business logic service, you need to return in the set data, needs to return true or false. So basically what this needs to do is to validate that value. You don't, in this, you won't change the value, because this, the object type for that specific usage, it will only be for validation. So it will only use the set data method, so which needs to return true or false. And basically you have here all other comments that can help you all to edit this specific object type class. Additionally, if the usage of this object type is for a result class, then you can extend that result class. So basically a result class, it means that the object that will be returned when you call some data access rule will not be an associative array, it will be this class here. Will be a list, probably if it is a list, if the database return a list of records. In this case, it will be returned, the system to return a list of these objects. And when you are using then these objects, you could extend this class with other methods. That's where you can do in here. Basically, this is just an example, but it helps you, and it informs you how can you play with the object type class. And that's it. Thank you very much.